It's a weird song to start with because it's not a church song. It's a popular culture song. It came out in June of this last year. The artist's name is Jelly Roll. He's a big dude. That's just his nickname. He's a real good dude. So he struggled with addiction, spent time in prison, and now in every town he goes to, he tours, he goes to a prison and has like a mini concert for prisoners. He had one recently where he got two or three of them. They were musicians themselves. He got them out on work release so that he could take them and have them perform a song that they performed for him in prison. So a real good dude. The basis of this song the three writers went to his concert, and at the end of the concert, they're like, that felt like a church experience. And he's like, when people come to my concerts, I want them to be okay with not being okay. And that was the whole basis of the song, was when people go to his concerts, they're hearing him talk about his own struggles, his own addiction, and then they get to see how he's overcome that. We live in a culture where admitting struggle feels like weakness, right? But today I want to talk about something he captures in his song so powerfully. It doesn't just sing about pain, he confesses it. And there's a difference. There's a difference in saying I'm in pain or talking about how much it hurts. Man, I just wish I could push on. And there's this hopelessness behind talking about being in pain and confessing it. Because almost with that confession, there's a sense of, but I want to do something about it, rather than dwell in it. Do you understand? Does that make sense? So it doesn't just talk about being in pain, he's confessing. It's raw, it's an unfiltered cry that says, I'm not okay, and I'm also tired of pretending to be. I want to push past this. I want to admit right where I am and what I'm dealing with. So let me ask this, how often do we take off our masks in our church, in our families, but more importantly, with ourselves? How often are we openly honest with ourselves about what we're struggling with? It's one thing to be vulnerable to somebody else. It's one thing to be vulnerable in church. It's a whole other thing to be vulnerable to yourself. But inside, we have all these feelings and they're swirling around, but we'll say we're fine. I'm fine. How you doing? I'm fine. But inside, there's this storm just swirling that we don't want to talk about. And maybe there's even some questioning if God is really there. If I'm feeling this way, God possibly couldn't be there. If I'm going through this, God isn't there. Today, I want to remind you that, and I want you to hear this clearly, God meets you where you are, not where you pretend to be. It doesn't matter if you don't say the quiet thing out loud. God is meeting you where you are, not where you're saying you are. You say, I'm fine. Okay. Some conviction's going to come soon. Can I tell you? You're like, I'm okay. I don't need to worry about this over here. At some point, God's going to go, no, you need to address this. Let's meet you where you are, not where you pretend to be. It's okay to not be okay, because God draws near to brokenheartedness and offers rest to the weary. We see it all the time, right? And I have it happen frequently in conversations where I'll be talking to somebody, be like, yeah, I'm doing great, this, that, the other. And I'm really in tune to people and what they're really feeling. And you can go, can I ask you a question? What's really going on? And at some point, it starts to break down. I'm guilty of it too, right? I'm guilty of it too. At least once a month, my brother will ask me how I'm doing, and I respond, I'm okay. And he's like, how are you really doing? Life, right? It happens. It happens to all of us. But Psalm 34:18 reminds us, the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. And what a promise. What a promise this is. But to experience that closeness, we must first acknowledge the truth about where we are. We often wish we could escape those troubles, the loss, the sorrow, or even the small daily frustrations that constantly wear us down. God promises to be close to us when we're brokenhearted and to be our source of power, courage, and wisdom, helping us through our problems. And sometimes he chooses to deliver us from those problems. Key word of that sentence, sometimes. So, sometimes you got to go through the thing. I'm sorry. I wish I could give you the rosy preaching that says God will deliver you every time. It'll be just fine. You'll never have obstacles. You say, God, get this obstacle out of my way, and he moves it. But sometimes you got to go over it. Got to go through it. Got to go around it. Got to go under it. It's not as easy as it just gets out of your way. Sometimes it is. But a lot of times, that path that you're going to take, it's going to be hard. It's going to drain you. But you got a strength of God like no other. And when you come out that other side, what a testimony you're going to have of God's greatness and how God can use that to lead others to him. When trouble strikes, don't get frustrated with God. Instead, we need to admit that we need God's help. And we need to thank him for being by our side, because he's there each and every time. David in Psalm 6:6 says, I am worn out from groaning. All night I flood my bed with weeping. And if you read the rest of Psalm 6, it's a lamentation passage. David is crying, weeping, complaining-ish. But God takes it, because God can take that. You can look at God and say, I am unhappy with the circumstances I'm in. God, I'm worn out. I have all of the human emotions. God can take all of those emotions. It's okay. You don't have to go to God happy. You don't have to even go to God with acceptance of where you are. You can go with the frustration. You can shake your fist at God. He can take it, I promise. He wants those honest emotions. Because when we move from a place of honesty, we're moving from a place of growth. When we sit in a place of denial, that means we're putting our feet down. No, I'm right. And you become immovable. But when you go, I'm not happy, but God, I know you can do it, but I'm still not happy about it, God can work with that. And growth can happen. But why is honesty so hard? First, shame. We fear judgment from others or maybe even God. So saying that quiet thing out loud, right? If I have to say that quiet thing out loud, all of a sudden I have to admit there's a problem. To God, to myself, and particularly to others, it can be hard. Because when you go to somebody with problems, we're a culture that naturally tries to fix. And way back in my first sermon in 2019, we talked about this, about listening and not doing. Sometimes people just need to vent. And it's okay. It's okay to go, I'm not unhappy with this, without having to respond with, what are you doing about it? And that's what we get a lot in culture, right? We go, man, this happened. I'm really upset. And they're like, then what happened? What'd you do about it? Did you try to fix the problem? Like, no, I'm frustrated. I don't need you to do anything about it. I don't even know if I need to do anything about it. I'm just don't like it. Perfect. Cool. Can we just leave it there? Do it. Because that starts this guilt pattern, right? It's like you go, I'm not happy with this, but I haven't done anything about it. Well, now I feel guilty because you said, why haven't you done anything about it? It's like, I'm still processing. Like, slow down. And so shame, guilt starts to come in. Cultural pressure tells us that we need to keep it together and push through. Fake it till you make it. Applicable in some circumstances. But at some point, you have to go acknowledge what you're faking. Like, the only way to make it is to go address what you're faking. Like, what you're ignoring, right? And then there's a fear of vulnerability. Admitting we're not okay feels like we're giving up control. But we have to. So take a moment to consider, is there an area in your life where you've been hiding pain, either from God, others, or yourself? And this year, bring that area to light, whether through prayer, journaling, or confiding in someone. Start with honesty. Healing can only begin when we admit we need it. You can't start to heal from something until you acknowledge that it's a problem. And I know this may sound contradictory to what Pastor Rod was talking about last week in Isaiah when we talk about don't dwell on the past. Well, things that you're holding on to and not acknowledging with God or with yourself, they're not of the past. You've been dragging them around into the future. They're in your present. So this isn't going, 3 years ago, I drank so much alcohol. That's how I use it as a coping mechanism. True story. That's how I coped with PTSD. It isn't going, oh man, I used to be such an addict. And then using that to influence my future and go, I'm always going to be that addict. That's dwelling in the past and going, I used to be such a terrible person. Dwelling in the present would be going, I don't have a drinking problem. This isn't factual. But then still going to consume drinks till I can go to sleep. You're like, I don't have a drinking problem. Okay, well, can we talk about it? Until you admit that's a problem, until you admit that you need help with that, healing can't begin. This isn't dwelling on the past. This is taking the past that you've been dragging with you into the present and never acknowledged and finally letting it go. And then it can be in the past. It can be your old ways. You can be made new. The song continues to reflect on a deep struggle with pain and brokenness, like addiction, self-doubt, and loneliness. And these struggles can feel like prisons. But here's the truth. God doesn't waste our pain. In fact, he uses our brokenness as a path to redemption. In Genesis, Joseph was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, and wrongfully imprisoned. If anyone had a reason to say, I am not okay, it was Joseph. But years later, when he confronted his brothers, he said something remarkable. He said, you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. God took Joseph's suffering and turned it into a story of redemption, not just for him, but an entire nation. An entire nation through his suffering. And it's crazy to just think, because we don't allow ourselves to think that what you've gone through could be a story that could heal a nation. Do you understand that? We go, I'm just a small dot in this world of billions. There's nothing God could do in my life that would be remarkable enough to pull me out of the shadows. Can I tell you that's a lie? That's a lie. Any one of us could go through something with God's strength, yielding to God's guidance, that may feel like it breaks us at the time, but the way God redeems us from it could be a story that brings nations to their knees. And I don't want to get into statistics or odds, because that's us trying to put a human lens on God. But to just believe that your brokenness, one, God will redeem you from it, and two, God will use it. Do you trust God enough to wait patiently for him to bring good out of the bad situations? God can do it. What does redemption look like? Purpose and pain. God can use your story to help others who are struggling. Healing through grace. Redemption often begins with God's grace freeing us from guilt and shame. And strength through weakness. 2 Corinthians 12:9. God tells Paul, my grace is sufficient for you. for my power is made perfect in weakness. NLT says, each time he said, my grace is all you need, and these words are in red, my power works best in weakness. My power works best in weakness. So now I am glad to boast about my weaknesses, so the power of Christ can work through me. Paul here doesn't have his affliction removed by God. He promised to demonstrate his power in Paul. The fact that God's power is displayed in our weakness should give us courage and hope. As we recognize our limitations, we will depend on God more for our effectiveness rather than our own energy, effort, or talents. But we have to admit it and affirm we need God's strength. So think of that area in your life where you felt stuck or broken. Can you trust God to redeem it? Can you trust God to redeem it? Even if you don't know how yet. Because that's the problem. We look at our problems and go, there's no way out of this. It's impossible. Because we see it through that box that we try to put stuff God in. It's not possible because it doesn't fit my understanding. God is so much greater than our understanding. He can do it. He can do it. God invites us to rest. Matthew 11:28-30 says, come to me all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Going further in the NLT, it says, come to me all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Let me teach you, because I am humble and gentle at heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy to bear, and the burden I give you is light. So what kind of rest does Jesus offer? He offers us rest for the soul. When we lay down the weight of guilt, shame, and performance, we all of a sudden can find freedom. Guilt is a heavy burden. Shame is a heavy burden. Trying to be good enough and feeling like we're not meeting it is a heavy burden. What God is saying is, come to me as you are. I don't care what you've done. I don't care what you're still stuck in. I don't care even how good you are. But release your life to me. And this is the rest that he offers us. He doesn't promise a life without challenges, but he does promise to walk with us through them. The world's expectations are heavy, but Jesus' yoke is easy because it is rooted in grace. Grace. Are you gracious with yourself? Who's your number one critic? You probably look at them when you look in the mirror. Grace. It all starts with grace. So what burdens are you carrying today? What burdens are you carrying? Name them. Say it silently to yourself. Write it in a journal. Take it to prayer and God. Name what your burdens are so that you can start to move past them, let go, and leave them in the past. Finally, community and connection. One of the most powerful lines in the song is in the sense of isolation, like no one understands. But God didn't design us to go through life alone. Galatians 6:2 says, carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. Hebrews 10:24-25 says, and let us consider how we may spur one another toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another. We have to support each other. We have to connect. If you're here and you're not involved in a small group, It's one thing to have these passing conversations on Sunday. It's another thing to have it in a small group, in a supporting environment, where I'm going to bring my heavy heart, you're going to bring your heavy heart, we're going to talk about it. Those with lighter hearts, they're going to talk us through it. They're going to be Jesus in that moment. 2 places you can start where you don't have to add another day: Sunday mornings. Women's group meets at 8:30, men's group usually meets at 8:30. Right next to each other, right here in the back. It's a great place to start. And then there's other journey groups that exist. If you want to know more about those, get with anybody on the staff. We can point you to the different leaders. But if you just want to start, if you just want to jump in and get that true sense of community, and I know you feel it on Sunday, right? Faith Journey, we do a great job of making you feel welcome when you walk through the door. People come and greet you, going to come ask you how you are, but you're only going to get so far in that conversation. You can only go so deep. And that's not to say in a small group that you're going to get all the way down here, but we're going to go a little bit deeper. And then you're going to form those connections to other people. You're going to see who you think you can put your trust into, and hopefully they don't break that trust. And then you're going to be able to have those one-on-one conversations where you go to the depths that you need to go. And it's not the depths you need to go to vent, it's the depths you need to go to transform. Starts with showing up on Sunday morning, and then we join a small group, and then we develop genuine, God-filled friends and have those deeper conversations. And what do we do to support each other in these moments? We listen without judgment. The woke term is safe spaces. It's not a bad term. Media will try to tell us it's a bad term, but you got to have a place that you feel safe to air out what you're going through. If I looked at Pastor Dennis and I said, hey, I'm going through all of this, and then he immediately went to someone, I understand spousal privilege. I do. But if you went to somebody else and you started being like, well, Pastor Michael's going through all of this, well, I may not feel safe talking to you. So you got to listen without that judgment and just create a safe space for someone to be honest about their struggles, that they know it stays there, right? And then on the other side of that, we need to be willing to share our story. Vulnerability invites connection. One of the reasons Faith Journey has drawn a lot of people in, when we talk to a lot of new people that come through the doors, is the sense of vulnerability that comes from the platform. It makes you feel like we're not talking at you, we're walking with you. When I can look at you and go, I struggle with alcohol. When I can look at you and go, I struggle with anxiety. I have PTSD. And we can have all these conversations. Suicide ideations. Like, when I admit I've been delivered from all that, but still have my struggles from time to time, it invites you to come and, if you're dealing with the same things, to have that conversation. Vulnerability invites that connection. Because how often have you gone to somebody and go, I'll pray for you? Okay, like, yes, I need that, but if I'm vulnerable to you and you go, I'm going to pray for you. Okay. It's different to go, I'll pray with you, right here, right now. And then later on, you flip it. The other person becomes the listener. You become vulnerable. But ultimately, our role is to remind each other of the hope we have in Christ. Ultimately, it all points back to Jesus. So I ask you, who in your life needs to hear you're not alone? And if you're struggling, are you willing to reach out? A song, again, it's a cry for help, for connection, for relief. I know I can't be the only one who's holding on for dear life. The sorrow in that statement, the depth of despair you have to be in to say that? If we're honest, at least one person is probably there today. Can I tell you it's okay to say I'm not okay? I'm not okay. But that chorus ends perfectly. I'm not okay, but it's all going to be all right. We're not okay, but it's all going to be all right. There's truth in that statement. God knows. Can we believe that it's going to be all right? Because it's in that confession, that statement, I'm not okay, that God meets us at. He meets us right there. Right there in that, I'm not okay. This happened, I'm not okay. He meets us in our honesty. He redeems our brokenness. He offers us rest. And he surrounds us with community. So I'm going to bring the checkpoint slide up. This is a great tool that Pastor Rod brought in from his group, from his cohort that he was doing, and there's value in it. And I didn't change the checkpoint; it's the same. Because I want to make sure we're going into the new year with that same thought. He gave us our New Year message last week, but I want to continue the same thought. I heard one of the news anchors said we're going to thrive in 25, which, man, if we could all thrive spiritually in 25, how great would we be? But the checkpoint, is God done doing miracles, providing and guiding those who love him, or do you believe he still does? In your I'm not okay, do you believe that God still wants to move in that? Does God still want to redeem your brokenness? Turn your weakness into strength? Or do you think he's done? He's forgotten about you? I hope it's the latter part of this question. You believe he still does. God still does. He still moves. He still wants to. And the action step is to take one step towards being honest. I know I said I want you to air out your burdens, write them down, tell them to somebody, tell them to God. You got to start somewhere. So let's just take one. One step towards being honest with God, a trusted friend, or even yourself. What's that burden you've been carrying? Dragging through life, maybe for days, weeks, months, years, decades. What is it? Think about it. Aren't you tired of dragging it? Aren't you tired of the weight? Take one step towards being honest. And the other side of this, if you're in a position to help, to be the hands and feet of Jesus to someone who is struggling, do it. It's not just how we grow as individuals, it's how we're going to grow as a faith body. It's how we're going to know where God is leading us, because we're all going to be in tune and as one moving forward. That's how we can end the year so much different than we started it. We need to be honest. We need to take that step. And we need to do it together. And God, can't he do it? Come on now. Can't God do it? And we got to root ourselves